Thank you for the invitation to brief the Security Council on my recent joint mission with the African Union to Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea and Somalia. This is a fourth visit I've undertaken focused on women, peace and security and development, and the third joint solidarity mission with the African Union. I am also pleased that Ambassador Fatima Kyari Mohammed is here to brief alongside me. At the request of the Prime Minister, I also travelled with senior United Nations officials to Sudan to focus on support for the transition, UNAMID, and women's leadership. These missions are an opportunity to strengthen the implementation of our shared UN-AU frameworks on peace and security, the 2030 Agenda and the 2063 agendas, and also on silencing the guns. I would like to commend the leadership of the chairperson, Faki, as well as the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Binta Diop, who led the AU delegation. In each country, we met heads of state, ministers, senior women, government officials, civil society, the international community, and our United Nations country teams and peacekeeping missions. I left all 5 countries with a sense of hope and optimism. The chance for peace in this region is very real. The international community, together with these countries, can find lasting solutions to the complex challenges of the region. Each country is moving at its own pace through a process of reform and transformation, and in all countries, women are playing a critical leadership role in social cohesion, economic revival, and peace. The leaders of these countries are making concrete efforts to place gender equality and greater representation of women at the heart of reforms in order to reap the benefits of the links between inclusion, stability, and peace, and to give substance to prevention efforts during these complex transitions. Madam President, Ethiopia now has its first woman president, and half its government ministers are women. Together, they hold some of the most significant decision-making portfolios in the country. The president is leading efforts at social cohesion, and women serve as ministers of peace, of labour and infrastructure, and are at the helm of the National Electoral Commission and the Supreme Court. The programme of government includes far-reaching legal reforms for greater gender equality. All of this was cited by the Nobel Committee when they awarded Prime Minister Abiy the Peace Prize last month. I also met with the Mothers of Peace Initiative, who are working across communities to repair the social fabric of the country, and with women who had served in UN peacekeeping, given Ethiopia's role as our largest troop-contributing country. In Somalia, we met with the Prime Minister and dynamic female ministers who are introducing reforms to address the challenges of women's low representation in political life. We heard from women in civil society on the front lines of preventing the spread of violent extremism. We also met with the head of the National Independent Electoral Commission, who has a challenging task ahead of her. Our efforts in Somalia must prioritise financial support to free, fair and inclusive elections next year, as well as to the national development priorities of the government, including debt relief. There are islands of stability in the country that can be built upon, but this will require more central government cooperation with federal member states, as well as a roadmap for transitional justice and social reintegration. In Eritrea, one of the few countries in the world where women fought in significant numbers on the front lines of the independence movement, gender equality and women's leadership is seen as an unquestioned reality. We met with young women entrepreneurs, and we saw the investments in critical infrastructure, from the multi-purpose dams to solar power and roads, which will reintegrate the country with the region. Relations between Eritrea and their neighbours are nascent, but they are making strides. And there is a unique opportunity in this moment for the international community to support greater integration and sustainable peace. In Djibouti, we met with the local women who have built community centres to care for children with disabilities and support refugee and migrant women in a context where many young women are fleeing conflict or migrating, seeking a better life, only to become the victims of human trafficking and horrendous abuse. The country has recently passed legislation that increases maternity leave and provides for greater protection from violence, gender parity in the civil service and the private sector, and a quota for women in parliament. In Sudan, I met some of the women who were in the engine of the revolution and are now demanding equality and social inclusion across all strata of society. All of this reinforces the need for us to question our own narrative and mindsets. I saw this as a region, some of the fastest growing economies on the continent, with rich natural resources, extraordinary capacity, particularly among their youth, and genuine reforms. These are the elements that we need to support and the narrative that we need to share. Madam President, the road ahead for the Horn of Africa will not be easy. The foundations have been laid for a transition from peace to sustainable development. But building on these fragile foundations will require unity and cooperation across the region and common ground internationally to accompany these transitions. This is particularly the case when it comes to the issue of refugees and internally displaced persons, of which there are tens of thousands, many of them vulnerable to trafficking. And equally in finding regional solutions to protection challenges, including sexual violence in areas where conflict is still going on. It was clear from our travels that this region is cut from the same fabric. Each country its own shade, but they are interwoven. What happens in one country will impact others, and so a regional approach and genuine collaboration is paramount. I'm encouraged in this regard by the signs of the revitalization of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. This platform will be essential to providing the necessary pathways we can all support. This is also the reason why it is important that this was a joint mission with the African Union. In working together, we can achieve so much more. As one government official said to us, the joint mission has changed the nature of the relationship with both the UN and the AU, and in terms of the quality and content of the dialogue. What is needed now is to maintain and deepen that dialogue and partnership, and to use this to encourage regional solutions and unity. Madam President, finally, turning to Sudan, last week you heard from an amazing young woman, Ala Salah, whose image became synonymous with the protests in Khartoum. I met Ala along with 3 other women civil society activists, Huda Shafiq, Safa Adam, and Samah Mohammed in New York, after talking to their counterparts in both Khartoum and El Fasher. Thanks to the efforts of these amazing women and thousands more like them, Sudan is seeing a new dawn. We must be ready to support the people and government through a successful transition that lays the foundations for truly inclusive elections and sustained peace. I welcome the recent unanimous extension by this Council of UNAMID's mandate for 1 more year, and for its decision to include in that mandate support to the peace process and peace-building activities. During my visit to El Fasher and meetings with women from the local communities, they made it clear that a premature drawdown could leave a security vacuum, exposing them to greater violence and putting at risk progress towards economic stability. We've just taken part in a whole-of-system visioning exercise with the Sudanese government that will enable us to respond to the changing context and support Sudan's priorities over the next 3 years of the transition. This exercise establishes a vision for our partnership with the Sudanese people, our support for those leading the transition, the Forces for Freedom and Change, the Sovereignty Council and the Transitional Government, and the National Development Plan that they have jointly constituted. Our responses will sequence immediate and longer-term activities in alignment with the priorities set by the government. These priorities include the peace process, economic and social development, economic reforms, the reintegration of internally displaced persons, and comprehensive transitional justice and reconciliation. These are tall orders, and while they need to be delivered urgently, expectations must also be managed. I urge the Council and the international community more broadly to assist to identify concrete actions which can be delivered in the short term over the next 3 months, maintaining momentum while addressing the mid- and the long-term opportunities necessary for lasting peace. At the same time, the government is committed to addressing root causes. I cannot put it better than the Sudanese minister who told me, "It is not peace documents that are missing in Sudan. We have shelves of beautifully worded peace agreements since independence. We need to address the root causes: exclusion, human rights, marginalization, underdevelopment. We need a Marshall Plan for areas of our country and the support of the international community to deliver this." Responding to the opportunity in Sudan will require putting aside our usual ways of working. Development investments must accompany the transition if it is to take root and flourish. continuous efforts in a wide range of critical areas, such as the delisting and the debt relief, will be urgently needed to give Sudan a fresh start, as will creative solutions for domestic resources and external investments, including tax reforms and the recovery of stolen assets. Excellencies, while they are moving at different speeds, each country in this region is heading in the right direction. We must seize this opportunity to invest and support peace towards women's participation and leadership, education, peace dividends, free and fair elections, and the short-term high-impact projects that reach those who are really farthest behind. Having met with our UN staff in each country, I can attest to their courage, their sacrifice, commitment, motivation, and willingness to walk this road together in support of the collective goals of national counterparts. From our UNOAU office, who are leading our partnership with the African Union on peace and security, to the innovative efforts of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime on trafficking in the region, UN Women's work to mobilize and support women's demands, UNDP's role in sustainable development, the Economic Commission for Africa's efforts in strengthening economies, and all those who serve in our UN country teams under the leadership of resident coordinators, alongside the critical work of our peacekeeping and political missions. With the solidarity and the support of the international community, these countries can overcome their challenges and become an anchor for growth and stability for the broader region and the African continent. Finally, I'd like to pay tribute to our peacekeepers and mention in particular our women in peacekeeping. In each country we visited, it was starkly clear the critical importance of women serving in security forces, in the police, in the military, and in peacekeeping. These women, against all odds, strengthen our protection efforts, increase the credibility of our efforts, engage in local level mediation, and make communities feel much more at ease. And yet, we continue to deploy less than 4% female peacekeepers. Much more can and should be done. Women shared their practical challenges with us. Even where they are enrolled in their national security services, they are often not provided the opportunities that are needed for that deployment, from map reading to specific driving and computer skills. When they are deployed, they often contend with harassment or are asked, in the end, to serve just coffee and tea, rather than to patrol the communities. The kits we provide do not fit the needs of women. In contexts such as Somalia, where head covering is needed, this is left to the individual woman to secure. And while this may be the first time these words have been said in the Security Council, sanitary pads are a basic necessity for women and do not form a part of their deployment kits. As you return to the open debate on women, peace and security this afternoon, I hope that these issues will be among those discussed. I humbly urge this distinguished council to heed the winds of change so that we may continue to strive towards peace in all hearts and in all nations. I thank you.